The doorbell camera notification hit my phone at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. Half asleep, I fumbled for my glasses and squinted at the screen. There was Margaret Blackwood, HOA board president, standing on my front porch in her bathrobe with a measuring tape, methodically checking the height of my new mailbox. What the hell? I muttered to my wife, Sarah, who groaned and pulled a pillow over her head. The next morning, I found a violation notice taped to my door. Not in my mailbox, taped directly to the door, with enough scotch tape to wrap Christmas presents. The notice claimed my mailbox exceeded the HOA-approved height by 3/4 of an inch, and I had 72 hours to correct it or face a $500 fine. I'd moved to Pine Valley Estates in suburban Phoenix 6 months earlier, drawn by the good schools for our 8-year-old daughter Emma and the promise of a quiet neighborhood. The houses were nice Mediterranean-style stucco, with tile roofs built in the early 2000s. Most neighbors seemed normal enough, though I'd quickly learned to avoid Margaret, who lived 3 houses down in the corner lot, with the perfectly manicured desert landscaping and the Blackwood sign that looked like it belonged on a law firm. "She measured your mailbox at 3 in the morning," Sarah asked over coffee, reading the notice. "That's not normal, Tom." "Nothing about Margaret is normal," I said. "Remember when she tried to find the Johnsons because their trash cans were visible from the street for 20 minutes after pickup? Or when she made the Nguyens repaint their front door because it was Sahara sunset instead of desert sand?" Sarah added. Emma looked up from her cereal. "Why does Mrs. Blackwood care about our mailbox?" "Some people have too much time on their hands, sweetheart," I said. But this felt different, more invasive. I worked from home as a software developer, and I'd noticed Margaret walking by our house multiple times a day lately, always slowing down, sometimes taking photos with her phone. That afternoon, I measured the mailbox myself. It was exactly 42 inches, the maximum height allowed in our CC&Rs. I measured it 3 times to be sure, then took photos with a tape measure clearly visible. I walked down to Margaret's house and rang the doorbell. She answered wearing what I'd come to think of as her uniform-pressed khaki shorts, a polo shirt with the HOA logo she'd had embroidered, and a clipboard. "Tom," she said, not inviting me in. "I assume you're here about the violation." "The mailbox is exactly 42 inches, Margaret. I have photos." "My measurements indicate otherwise," she said, tapping her clipboard. 42 3/4 inches. "Perhaps you should invest in a more accurate measuring tape." "You measured it at 3 in the morning," I said. "I have you on camera." Her expression didn't change. "The CC&Rs don't specify hours for compliance verification. In fact, I've been meaning to discuss your cameras with you. They face the street, which could be construed as surveillance of common areas. They face my own property and capture the street incidentally, which is perfectly legal." "We'll see what the board says about that," she said. "Was there anything else?" "Yeah, actually. Why were you on my porch at 3 a.m.? "Conducting HOA business," she said. "If you'll excuse me, I have other violations to document." She closed the door in my face. Over the next few days, things escalated. I received 3 more violations. Grass height mine was exactly 2 inches the maximum, allowed a small oil stain on my driveway, barely visible, and excessive holiday decorations for the string lights Sarah had put around our front window in November. "This is harassment," Sarah said, sorting through the growing pile of notices. $400 in fines already." "She's trying to force us out," I said. "The question is why." I started paying attention. Margaret seemed to have it out for several houses on our street, but especially ours and the Garcias next door. Miguel Garcia was a Phoenix police officer, and his wife Rosa taught at Emma's school. They'd lived here 5 years and had never had problems until Margaret got elected board president 6 months ago, right around when we moved in. "She's lost her mind," Miguel told me over the fence that weekend while our kids played in his backyard pool. "Yesterday she tried to fine us because Sophia's bicycle was visible in our garage when the door was open for 10 minutes. That can't be legal," I said. "It's not, but she counts on people not knowing that or not wanting to fight." He lowered his voice. "Hey, did you know she's been trying to buy houses on this street?" "Well, what Martin?" Rosa heard from Jennifer Chen, who's on the architectural committee. "Margaret's made offers on 3 houses in the past year. Lowball offers, but always right after she hits them with a bunch of fines. That's," I paused processing this, "that's extortion." "Good luck proving it," Miguel said. "But yeah, something's definitely going on." The next violation came on Monday. This time it was for unauthorized fauna because a roadrunner had been seen in my yard. The fine, $750. I'd had enough. I drove to the property management company that handled our HOA administration, a small office in a strip mall between a nail salon and a tax prep place. The receptionist, a young woman named Ashley with purple-streaked hair, looked up from her computer. "Let me guess," she said before I could speak. "Pine Valley Estates." "Hi, T." "How did you know?" She sighed. "We've been getting a lot of complaints. Like a lot." "What did Margaret do now?" I showed her the violations. Her eyes widened at the Roadrunner one. "She fined you because a wild bird was in your yard. Apparently it's unauthorized fauna. That's insane, even for her." Ashley glanced around, then leaned forward. "Look, I'm not supposed to say anything, but you might want to request a hearing with the full board and maybe bring a lawyer. Has anyone else done that?" "How does this for one-on-one?" "A few people. The Washingtons from Juniper Lane got all their fines reversed last month when they showed up with an attorney." Margaret backed down immediately. "Interesting," I said. "Can I get copies of all HOA meeting minutes from the past year?" "Sure, but it'll take me a few days to pull everything together. There's a lot." That night, Sarah and I were eating dinner when Emma ran in from the backyard. "Dad, there's a lady taking pictures of our pool." I rushed outside to find Margaret in our backyard, photographing our above-ground pool with a telephoto lens camera. "What the hell are you doing in my yard?" I shouted. "Documenting violations," she said calmly. "This pool doesn't have proper permits." "Get out. Now, you're trespassing." "I'm conducting HOA business. The CC&Rs grant board members access for inspection purposes. They absolutely do not grant you the right to enter private property without notice or permission," I said, pulling out my phone. "I'm calling the police." "Go ahead," she said, but I noticed she was already walking toward the gate. "You'll be hearing from our attorneys about the pool." I called 911 anyway. Officer Kim responded, and I recognized him as Miguel's colleague. "She was in your backyard without permission?" he asked, taking notes. "Taking photos of our pool. She says she has the right as HOA president." "She doesn't," Officer Kim said flatly. "HOAs have some inspection rights, but they still need to provide notice and can't just enter private property whenever they want." "Do you want to file a trespassing complaint?" No. "What happens if I do want to?" "We'd have to investigate, take statements. Probably wouldn't lead to charges unless she does it again, but it would create a paper trail." "Then yes, I want to file a complaint." After Officer Kim left, I found Sarah stress baking in the kitchen, something she only did when really upset. "She was in our yard, Tom, where Emma plays." "I know. This has to stop." "I know," I said. "I'm going to call a lawyer tomorrow." But Margaret beat me to it. The next morning, a process server showed up at my door with papers. The HOA was placing a lien on our house for $3,200 in unpaid fines and demanding we remove the pool within 30 days. $3,200, Sarah read, incredulous. How did it get to that amount? The paperwork showed daily fines accumulating for each violation, plus late fees, plus administrative fees. It was designed to be crushing. I called my brother-in-law, David, who was a real estate attorney in Scottsdale. "This is aggressive, even for an HOA, he said after I explained everything. "Send me all the documentation. The trespassing complaint was smart that shows a pattern of harassment. And Tom, start talking to your neighbors. If she's doing this to multiple people, you might have grounds for a class action." I spent the next 3 days knocking on doors. The stories I heard were shocking. The elderly couple on Oak Street had been fined for having their grandchildren's chalk drawings on their driveway. The young family on Mesquite had received violations for their baby crying during quiet hours. The Chens had been threatened with liens for having the wrong shade of white on their trim. She measured the distance between my rose bushes. Mrs. Patterson told me an 80-year-old widow who'd lived in Pine Valley for 15 years said they were planted in a pattern that violated the landscaping guidelines. I've had those roses for a decade. By Thursday, I documented 17 households with similar stories. The total in fines Margaret had issued in 6 months exceeded $45,000. Miguel organized a meeting at his house that Saturday. 23 homeowners showed up, cramming into his living room. The anger was palpable. "She's trying to drive us out," said Jennifer Chen. "I'm on the architectural committee, and she's brought up property values, constantly saying certain houses are bringing down the neighborhood." "Which houses?" Rosa Garcia asked, though her tone suggested she already knew. "The ones with kids, mostly. Or anyone she considers problematic. So basically, anyone who isn't a retired white couple with perfect landscaping," someone said from the back. "Hey now," Mr. Patterson spoke up. He was white, retired, and had perfect landscaping. "She's coming after us, too. This isn't about race or age. It's about control. And probably money. David had driven down for the meeting. Folks, what you're describing could constitute harassment, selective enforcement, and possibly discrimination. HOAs have broad powers, but they can't be applied arbitrarily or in bad faith. So what do we do? Asked Mrs. Washington. First, demand a special meeting to review all fines. Second, request financial records, every HOA expenditure, every contract, every payment. Third, if you have enough support, call for a recall election. How many votes do we need? Miguel asked. David pulled up our CC&Rs on his laptop. According to your bylaws, you need 25% of homeowners to call for a special election and 51% to recall a board member. There are 104 houses in Pine Valley, Jennifer said, so we need 26 to call for the election. We have 23 here, I said, counting heads. We can get 3 more. I'll talk to the Johnstons. Someone volunteered. The new couple on Desert Rose will definitely sign ours, another added. Margaret must have had spies at the meeting because Monday morning every attendee received new violations. Mine was for seditious assembly and conspiring to undermine HOA authority. The fine $1,000. Seditious assembly. Sarah laughed, but it was bitter. Is she serious? Dead serious, I said, reading the notice. She's also called an emergency board meeting for tonight to discuss threats to community harmony. The meeting was at the community center, a beige building with fluorescent lighting that made everyone look sick. Margaret sat at the head table with the 2 other board members, Bob Turner, a retiree who seemed perpetually confused, and Linda Martinez, who spent the entire meeting looking at her phone. Margaret called the meeting to order. We're here to discuss the illegal assembly that took place on Saturday and the conspiracy to disrupt HOA operations. It was a neighborhood barbecue, Miguel said from the audience. With a lawyer present, Margaret shot back. Discussing HOA business, which we have every right to do. David stood up. I'm David Morrison, attorney representing several Pine Valley homeowners. Nothing about that gathering was illegal, and frankly, calling it seditious could constitute defamation. You're out of order, Margaret said. This isn't a homeowner forum. Actually, Jennifer Chen stood up. According to the bylaws, any homeowner can speak at any board meeting. Not without being recognized by the chair, Margaret snapped. Then I move to be recognized, Jennifer said. Denied. You can't just deny it, Mrs. Patterson called out. That's not how Robert's rules work. The meeting devolved from there. Margaret tried to push through a motion to increase fines for community disruption, but Linda Martinez surprised everyone by voting no. I've been getting calls all week, Linda said, finally looking up from her phone. People are upset, Margaret. Maybe we should reconsider some of these fines. The fines are necessary to maintain standards, Margaret insisted. Fining people because birds land in their yard isn't maintaining standards, Linda replied. It's insanity. Bob Turner just looked confused. What about birds? After the meeting, Linda pulled me aside in the parking lot. I had no idea it had gotten this bad. She handles all the violations herself, just tells us about them after. I thought people were exaggerating. They're not, I said. If anything, they're underreporting. I'll vote to reverse the fines if you bring them to the board, she said. But I can't do it alone. Bob always votes with Margaret. What if Margaret wasn't on the board anymore? Linda glanced around nervously. You have the votes for a recall. We're getting close. Get them, she said. Fast, she's planning something big. I found out what that something big was 2 days later. Ashley from the property management company called me whispering. I could get fired for this, but you need to know. Margaret just submitted a proposal for a special assessment, $10,000 per household for emergency infrastructure repairs. $10,000. She claims the roads need immediate resurfacing. But here's the thing, I pulled the inspection reports. The roads were rated as good condition just 6 months ago. Can she do that without a vote? The board can approve special assessments up to a certain amount, but $10,000 requires homeowner approval, except she's calling it emergency repairs, which might let her bypass that. Jesus Christ. There's more, Ashley said. The company she wants to hire for the work, it's owned by her brother-in-law. I immediately called David. That's fraud, straight up fraud. Get me those inspection reports and the contract proposal. We're going nuclear. That night, someone spray-painted Hoa Nazi on Margaret's driveway. I knew it wasn't anyone from our group. We'd specifically talked about keeping things legal and above board. But Margaret used it as ammunition. She sent out an email blast to all homeowners with photos of the graffiti claiming she was being terrorized by a mob. and that certain elements were trying to destroy our community values. She announced she was hiring private security to patrol the neighborhood, and the cost would be added to our HOA fees. She's playing victim, Sarah said, reading the email. Classic manipulation. It might work, I said. People who haven't been targeted don't know what's really going on. We needed to act fast. Miguel and I spent the next 2 days going door to door with documentation copies of the ridiculous fines the inspection reports Ashley had leaked the connection between Margaret and the paving company. It was exhausting, but it worked. By Friday, we had 41 signatures calling for a special election. The following Monday, I submitted the petition to the property management company with David present as a witness. Ashley date-stamped it and gave us a receipt. The board has 30 days to schedule the election. She said loud enough for her boss in the back office to hear. Then quietly, Margaret already knows. She came in this morning. That afternoon, I got a call from Emma's school. She was in the nurse's office upset because Margaret had approached her at recess. She told Emma that we were bad neighbors and that we might have to move, the principal explained. Emma's quite shaken. I saw red. Sarah had to physically stop me from marching to Margaret's house. This is what she wants, Sarah said. She wants you to do something stupid so she can use it against us. She went after our kid, Sarah. I know, and we're going to bury her for it, but legally, David agreed. Approaching a minor at school about adult matters that could be considered harassment of a child. File a report with the school and the police. Officer Kim took the report seriously. This is the same woman you filed the trespassing complaint against. Yes. We'll have a chat with her about appropriate boundaries. 2 days later, Margaret made her next move. She called an emergency board meeting and tried to pass the special assessment. But Linda Martinez had done her homework. I moved to table this pending a full homeowner vote, Linda said. The motion is out of order, Margaret replied. No, it's not. Linda pulled out a copy of the bylaws. Section 7.32, any board member can move to table a financial motion pending review. I second the motion. Bob Turner said, surprising everyone. Margaret stared at him. My wife got a fine for our American flag being too large, he said. On Veterans Day, I'm a veteran, Margaret. That crossed a line. The motion to table passed 2-1. Margaret's face turned purple. You're making a mistake. This community needs leadership, not mob rule. What it needs, Linda said, is a board that doesn't terrorize residents. The recall election was scheduled for December 15th. Margaret went into overdrive, sending daily emails about how the radical elements were trying to destroy property values and turn Pine Valley into a lawless wasteland. She also started issuing fines at an unprecedented rate. My family alone received 12 new violations in 1 week, including one for excessive breathing near common areas, that even David couldn't believe was real. She's lost it, he said. Completely lost it. Save everything. This is going to make one hell of a lawsuit. The Garcias had it even worse. Margaret filed complaints with Miguel's department claiming he was using his position to intimidate her. She called CPS on Rosa, saying she'd seen her leave Emma and Sophia unsupervised. They were in the backyard pool visible from the kitchen window. She even called the health department about their unsanitary garbage cans. She's trying to destroy our lives, Rosa said, crying at our kitchen table. Over what HOA violations? It's not about the violations, I said. It never was. Ashley found out Margaret's been in talks with a development company. They want to buy up houses and build luxury condos. Are you serious? She gets a finder's fee for every house that sells to them. Guess who suddenly wants to sell after getting hit with thousands in fines and harassment? The smoking gun came from an unexpected source. Bob Turner's wife, Helen, called me a week before the election. You need to see something, she said. Can you come over? Their house was exactly what you'd expect from a retired military couple, immaculate, organized with an American flag flying proudly in HOA-approved dimensions now. Helen handed me a folder. Bob's been on the board for 3 years. He keeps all the meeting minutes. Look at these. The minutes from before Margaret became president showed normal HOA business approving paint colors, organizing community events, minor maintenance issues. After she took over, the tone changed dramatically. But more importantly, there were discrepancies. These financial reports, I said, studying the numbers. They don't match. Keep reading, Helen said. I found it on page 47. Over $30,000 in HOA funds paid to consulting services that turned out to be a company Margaret owned. She's embezzling. Bob didn't realize it until Linda started asking questions last week. He's not, he's not great with financial stuff. Margaret always handled it. Helen, this is criminal. I know, Bob's devastated. He feels responsible. He was manipulated. We all were. What are you going to do with this? What do you mind him? End this, I said, once and for all. I took the evidence to David, who immediately contacted the district attorney's office. This is beyond civil violations now. This is criminal fraud. 3 days before the election, the police arrested Margaret at the community center during what was supposed to be another board meeting. The image of her being led away in handcuffs while shouting about ungrateful residents and property values would become legendary in Pine Valley. The recall election was almost anticlimactic after that. 89% voted to remove Margaret from the board, though she was already suspended pending criminal charges. Linda became interim president and immediately reversed all fines from the past 6 months. The investigation revealed Margaret had stolen over $50,000 in HOA funds, using them for personal expenses, while claiming they were for community improvements. She'd also been getting kickbacks from every fine collected. The development company deal was real. She stood to make $100 as if she could force enough sales. She ended up pleading guilty to embezzlement and fraud, getting 2 years probation and ordered to pay restitution. The HOA bylaws were completely rewritten with checks and balances to prevent future abuse. The Garcia's false reports were all dismissed. Mrs. Patterson's roses were officially recognized as a community treasure in the new bylaws. The Chens repainted their trim any shade of white they wanted. Even Bob Turner kept his oversized flag flying, and nobody said a word. A month later, we had a real community barbecue, not a seditious assembly. Linda Martinez was there flipping burgers and laughing about how she'd thought being on the HOA board would be boring. Bob and Helen Turner brought potato salad. The Washingtons, the Nguyens, the Pattersons, the Garcias, everyone who'd been targeted was there. You know what the ironic part is? Miguel said, watching our kids play in the pool Margaret had tried to make us remove. She was so worried about property values, but having a tyrant HOA president actually drove them down. Jennifer said 3 houses had deals fall through because buyers Googled the HOA and found all the crazy violations. Now that she's gone, we've had 6 new families move in, Rosa added. All young couples with kids. The neighborhood's never been more alive. Emma ran up dripping wet from the pool. Dad, can Sophia spend the night? Of course, sweetheart. Mrs. Blackwood would have fined us for excessive child noise. Sarah laughed. No more Blackwood, I said. No more measuring mailboxes at 3 a.m. No more fear of checking the mail because there might be another violation. That night, as I helped Sarah clean up after the barbecue, I thought about how close we'd come to just giving up and moving. How many families had Margaret successfully driven out before we stood up to her? How many neighborhoods were suffering under their own Margaret Blackwoods? 6 months later, Margaret's house went on the market. She moved to another state, presumably to find a new HOA to terrorize. We threw another block party the day the moving truck left. The new family who bought her house seemed nice, a young couple with twins. At their welcome party, they mentioned they'd chosen Pine Valley specifically because they'd heard about how the community came together to fight injustice. We wanted neighbors who look out for each other, the wife said. Well, you found them, I said, looking around at all the faces that had become friends through adversity. We definitely look out for each other here. Linda's still HOA president, but now properly elected, had instituted monthly community meetings where people could voice concerns before they became violations. The board now required unanimous votes for any fines over $100, and there was a strict prohibition on measuring anything at 3 a.m. One evening, about a year after Margaret's arrest, I was sitting on my porch when Bob Turner walked by with his dog. He stopped to chat, something he'd never done during Margaret's reign. You know, Tom, I owe you an apology, he said. I should have seen what was happening. Should have stopped it sooner. She fooled a lot of people, Bob. Maybe, but I was on the board. I had a responsibility. He paused. Helen and I are thinking of moving. Not because of the neighborhood, we love it here now, but the memories you know. I understand, I said. But for what it's worth, nobody blames you. You stood up when it counted. He nodded, blinking rapidly. That's kind of you to say. After he left, Sarah came out and sat beside me. You know what I realized? We never fixed the mailbox. What? The mailbox that started all this. Margaret said it was 3/4 of an inch too tall, remember? I laughed. Oh, you're right. Want me to measure it? Don't you dare, she said. I like it exactly the way it is. The truth was the mailbox had never been the point. It was about power, control, and money. Margaret had weaponized the HOA structure to terrorize a community, and she'd almost gotten away with it. But she'd underestimated something crucial, the power of neighbors coming together. She'd thought she could pick us off one by one, that we'd be too embarrassed by our violations or too afraid of the fines to fight back. She didn't count on Miguel and Rosa organizing meetings or Jennifer Chen knowing the bylaws better than she did, or Mrs. Patterson's righteous anger about her roses, or Linda Martinez finally looking up from her phone and paying attention. She definitely didn't count on a software developer with too much time on his hands documenting everything, and a real estate attorney brother-in-law who enjoyed nothing more than taking down corrupt HOAs. The Pine Valley Estates HOA still exists. It still has rules about grass height and paint colors. But now those rules are enforced reasonably with warnings before fines and a clear appeals process. The board meetings are actually boring now, focusing on things like playground equipment and holiday decorations contests instead of persecution campaigns. Sometimes I drive past Margaret's old house and remember that night she stood on my porch with her measuring tape. It seems almost surreal now, like something from a bad movie. But the security footage is still saved on my hard drive, a reminder that sometimes the most ordinary-looking people in the most ordinary-looking neighborhoods can become tiny tyrants if nobody stops them. Emma, now 10, occasionally asks about mean Mrs. Blackwood and why she was so angry all the time. I tell her that some people mistake control for respect, that they think making others miserable will somehow make them happy. It never does. But we stopped her, right, Dad? She always says. We did, sweetheart, all of us together. Good, she says, and goes back to playing secure in the knowledge that her home is safe, her community is strong, and nobody's going to measure our mailbox in the middle of the night ever again. Just last week, a new homeowner posted in our neighborhood Facebook group, worried about their trash cans being visible from the street for an hour after pickup. The response was immediate and unanimous. Don't worry about it. We don't do that anymore. Linda commented, as long as you're not leaving them out for days, you're fine. We're reasonable here now. Reasonable, what a concept for an HOA. The final irony came when property values actually went up after Margaret's removal. Turns out families wanted to live in a neighborhood where kids could draw with chalk, where roses could grow wild, where flags could fly proud, and where neighbors looked out for each other instead of reporting each other. The real estate agent who sold Margaret's house told me she'd actually used our story as a selling point. I told buyers this was a community that stood up for itself. She said, that's worth more than perfect landscaping any day. She was right. We'd fought for our community and won. But more than that, we discovered something important. The power was always ours. The HOA, the board, the rules, they only had as much control as we gave them. When we stood together, when we refused to be intimidated, when we demanded accountability, everything changed. Every now and then, someone new moves in and asks about the Margaret Blackwood Memorial Clause. In our bylaws, the one that limits board members to 2 consecutive terms and requires monthly financial audits. We tell them the story, and they usually laugh, then grow serious when they realize we're not exaggerating. She really measured mailboxes at 3 a.m. She really did, and tried to find someone for wild birds. Unauthorized fauna, she called it. Wow. Yeah, wow. The neighborhood kids have turned Margaret into something of a legend, a boogeyman figure they joke about around Halloween. Better clean your room or Margaret Blackwood will fine you. It's funny because it's safely in the past now, because she can't hurt us anymore. But I remember the stress, the sleepless nights, the fear every time I saw an envelope taped to my door. I remember Sarah crying over the harassment, Emma afraid we'd have to move Miguel and Rosa, dealing with false reports that could have destroyed their careers. That's why I tell this story. Not because it's entertaining, though I admit there's dark humor in some of Margaret's more absurd violations, but because it's important. Every neighborhood needs people willing to stand up, to document, to organize, to fight back against abuse of power, no matter how petty that power might seem. Margaret Blackwood thought she could rule through fear and fines. She discovered that a community united is stronger than any HOA president, no matter how many measuring tapes they own or how early they're willing to wake up to find violations. Our mailbox still stands at exactly 42 inches. I've measured it just once since Margaret left out of curiosity. It was perfect, just like it always had been. Just like our imperfect, chalk-drawn, flag-flying, Rose-growing, kid-laughing neighborhood is perfect. The way it should be. Every spring on the anniversary of Margaret's arrest, we have what we call Freedom Day, a block party where everyone deliberately commits minor former violations. We draw with chalk, we leave our trash cans out an extra hour, we plant flowers in unapproved patterns. It's silly, but it's ours. Linda always makes the same joke. As HOA president, I officially don't see anything. And we all laugh because we can laugh now. Because our homes are our homes again, not Margaret's fiefdom. That's the real victory. Not just stopping her, but healing afterward. Building something better from the ruins of her tiny tyranny. Creating a community where neighbors help each other instead of reporting each other, where board members serve, instead of rule, where a mailbox can just be a mailbox. Sometimes late at night, I stand on my porch and look down the street toward Margaret's old house. The new family has painted the door a bright, cheerful blue, definitely not an approved color from Margaret's era. Their kids' bikes are scattered on the lawn. Their garbage cans are sometimes visible from the street. And nobody cares. That's how you know you've really won. Not when the tyrant is defeated, but when their tyranny becomes so unthinkable that children leave their bikes out without fear. The last I heard, Margaret was living in a retirement community in Florida, one with no HOA. I guess even she learned her lesson about the dangers of unchecked power, though I doubt she sees it that way. She probably tells herself she was trying to maintain standards, that we were ungrateful, that property values mattered more than people. But we know better. We learned that property values mean nothing if you're miserable in your own home. That standards maintained through fear aren't really standards at all. That a perfectly manicured neighborhood where everyone's afraid is worth less than a lived-in community where everyone belongs. Remember when you couldn't sleep because you were worried about that mailbox? Sarah asked me recently. Don't remind me, I said. I'm reminding you because look how far we've come. Look at this neighborhood now. She was right. Kids were playing street hockey using the Garcia's trash cans as goals. Mrs. Patterson's roses had spread into a glorious tangle that would have given Margaret an aneurysm. Someone had set up a lemonade stand without a permit. The new family's blue door blazed in the sun like a beacon of freedom. It's beautiful, I said. It's home, Sarah corrected. And that's the difference Margaret never understood. She thought she was protecting property values, maintaining standards, running a tight ship. But she was destroying the very thing that makes a neighborhood valuable, the sense of home, of belonging, of community. We rebuilt that sense stronger than before. We turned our HOA from a weapon into a tool, our board, from rulers into servants, our neighborhood from a collection of properly maintained houses into a community of friends who happen to live near each other. And my mailbox still exactly 42 inches tall. I had it bronzed last month, kidding. But I did put up a small plaque next to it that says Freedom Height 42 inches. Most people don't get it, but the neighbors who lived through the Margaret era always smile when they see it. It's a reminder that we won, that we stood together, that we took back our community from someone who forgot that power is meant to serve, not to dominate. Every time I see that mailbox, I think about that night at 2:47 a.m. when everything started. How a woman with a measuring tape and too much time on her hands nearly destroyed a neighborhood. How she weaponized rules meant to help us and turned them into instruments of harassment. How she might have succeeded if we hadn't found each other, supported, each other fought together. But mostly I think about how good it feels to check my mail without fear, to let my daughter play in the yard, without wondering what violation we're committing, to live in my home like it's actually mine. That's all we ever wanted, really. To live in peace, to raise our families, to tend our gardens, rows or otherwise, and to know that our neighbors have our backs instead of photographing our violations. Margaret Blackwood tried to take that from us. She failed. And in failing, she actually gave us something precious, the knowledge that we're stronger together than any would-be tyrant, that our community belongs to us, and that a mailbox is just a mailbox unless we let someone turn it into a weapon. The new families moving in don't know this history unless we tell them. They see a friendly neighborhood with reasonable HOA rules and neighbors who wave when they pass. They don't know about the war we fought for that normalcy, the thousands of dollars in fines we overturned the criminal who was masquerading as a concerned board president. Maybe that's for the best. They get to enjoy the peace we fought for without the trauma we endured. Their kids can draw with chalk and ride bikes and play in pools without ever knowing there was once a woman who would have fined their parents for such audacity. But we remember. Those of us who lived through it carry those memories like scars that have healed but still ache when it rains. We watch new board members carefully. We read every HOA email thoroughly. We show up to meetings that would otherwise be empty. We're the guardians now, making sure another Margaret never rises to power. Eternal vigilance is the price of freedom. Mr. Patterson likes to say, usually while trimming his roses in patterns that would have cost him hundreds in fines 2 years ago. He's not wrong. The structures that allowed Margaret to abuse her power are still there. The HOA, the bylaws, the theoretical ability to fine and lien. We've added safeguards, checks and balances, term limits, and transparency requirements. But systems are only as good as the people running them and the people watching them. So we watch. We participate. We make sure Linda and the new board members remember they work for us, not the other way around. We teach new neighbors their rights, show them the bylaws, explain why there's a clause specifically prohibiting board members from conducting inspections between 10 p.m. and 8 a.m., the Blackwood Amendment, we call it. The kids who lived through it are different too. Emma and her friends have a keen sense of justice now, a sharp eye for abuse of power. They question authority in healthy ways, ask for reasons behind rules, stand up for kids being picked on. They learned young that bullies can wear polo shirts and carry clipboards, that tyranny can hide behind bureaucracy, and that standing up to both is not just possible, but necessary. My dad fought the HOA lady and won, I heard Emma tell a new friend proudly. We all did, I corrected her. The whole neighborhood, together. Yeah, but you started it, Dad. You didn't just pay the fine. She's right about that. I could have just fixed the mailbox that wasn't broken, paid the fine for the violation that wasn't valid, hoped Margaret would move on to someone else. A lot of people did that. At first paid rather than fought, hoped compliance would buy peace. It never does. Give a tyrant an inch, and they'll measure it at 3 a.m. and fine you because it's actually an inch and a quarter. The thought makes me laugh now, but it wasn't funny then. It was terrifying, infuriating, exhausting. The amount of time and energy we spent fighting Margaret's violations could have been used for so many better things. The money we spent on lawyers could have gone to our kids' college funds. The stress we endured affected our health, our marriages, our work. But we won. And winning taught us something valuable we're capable of more than we think when we stand together. The neighborhood that fought Margaret is the same neighborhood that now organizes meal trains when someone's sick, that built a community garden. Where the Blackwood lawn used to be, oh, she would have hated that raises money for families in need without anyone keeping score. We learned to be neighbors again. Real neighbors, not just people who happen to live near each other and occasionally wave while checking for violations. Last month, we had a situation that would have sent Margaret into orbit. The new family 2 doors down, the Pereses, accidentally painted their fence the wrong shade of brown. Under the old regime, that would have meant fines, liens, forced repainting. Under our new approach, Jennifer Chen knocked on their door with a smile and paint samples. Hey, just wanted to let you know the HOA has approved colors for fences. Here's the list. No rush, just whenever you get around to it. They repainted it the next weekend. No fines, no threats, no measuring tapes at 3 a.m. Just neighbors helping neighbors navigate reasonable rules reasonably applied. That's the community Margaret accidentally created through her tyranny, one that knows the value of freedom because we've lost it, that appreciates peace because we've fought for it, that treasures reasonableness because we've suffered through absurdity. Would I go through it again? God, no. The stress nearly broke us. But am I grateful for what we became because of it? Absolutely. We're not just a neighborhood anymore. We're a community that's been tested and proven. We've faced our petty tyrant and won. We've taken back our streets, our homes, our dignity. We've learned that HOA doesn't have to stand for Homeowner Oppression Association, that boards can serve instead of rule, that rules can protect instead of persecute. And we've learned that sometimes, just sometimes, the little guy wins. The regular folks with their normal houses and their imperfect lawns and their kids' bikes in the driveway can stand up to the tyrant with the measuring tape and the clipboard and the vindictive spirit, and they can win. Not easily, not quickly, not without cost, but decisively, completely, and permanently. Margaret Blackwood is gone, but her legacy lives on, not in fear and fines, but in the strength she inadvertently gave us, the bonds she accidentally forged between us, the community she unintentionally created through her opposition to everything community should be. Every time neighbors help neighbors, every time the board listens instead of dictates, every time a child draws with chalk without fear, Margaret loses again. And we win again and again in small daily victories that add up to something bigger, a home, a community, a place where people want to live. Not because the lawns are perfect, but because the neighbors are kind. That's our real victory. Not just defeating Margaret, but becoming better because of it. Not just ending her reign of terror, but building something she could never understand, a community based on mutual respect, reasonable expectations, and the radical idea that people should be able to enjoy their own homes. My mailbox still stands at 42 inches, measured once at 3 a.m. by a tyrant standing forever as a monument to the night everything changed. It's just a mailbox to everyone else, but to those of us who lived through the Blackwood era, it's a reminder. We stood our ground, we fought back, we won, and we'll never let it happen again. The sun sets over Pine Valley Estates, painting the stucco houses gold, warming the tile roofs, glinting off windows that no longer hide worried faces. Children play in the streets, neighbors chat over fences. Gardens grow wild or neat as their owners prefer. Flags fly, chalk decorates driveways, and somewhere a roadrunner crosses a yard without authorization. This is our neighborhood now, our community, our home. And nobody is measuring anything at 3 a.m. That's how we know we're free. Every reasonable rule exists for a reason, but when rules become weapons, when measurement becomes harassment, when governance becomes tyranny, remember this: stand together, document everything, and never ever let them make you feel guilty for living in your own home. This is a dramatized story inspired by common HOA disputes, not legal advice.